A lot of people like to add images to websites, and there's a lot of different reasons for adding them. There's the old adage that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and so maybe you can use an image to convey a lot of stuff that either a text can't, or it'd take a whole lot of text. And we know that people don't read a lot of text on a web page. They prefer to scan and look at images, so let's give them that image instead. We might use an image to set the mood of the article or to provide additional information, whether it be through a picture of what we're talking about or the author or anything else. And we have multiple ways actually of using a picture. We can use a picture as a background. We can use it as a foreground image. We can have multiple pictures and images. So let's look at a couple of ways that we're going to add the image. We're first going to do it with adding an image directly into the HTML, and then in the next video we're going to look at styling those images. And that's just how we're going to make modifications to do things like putting in background, resize, etc. So adding an image is very, very easy. I'm going to come in here to a part of my text, and I'm just going to really quick make this so it's a little bit bigger so you can kind of see where I'm going. And typically people will either put it at the beginning of a paragraph or outside of a paragraph tag, so you don't even have to put it inside of another tag if you don't want to. So for example, here after this subheading, I'm going to go and create a new blank line, and I'm going to use the image tag, img. Now the image tag has one required attribute and a couple pretty important attributes you might want to use as well. So we want to look at the required attribute first. And the required attribute is the src, and that's short for source. And source is just going to let us know where this image is. Now, from an organizational standpoint, I like to put my images under an images folder. And this way I can just group them all together. I can find them, especially if I'm going to have a bunch. Now I can pick what image I want. And I'm going to pick this one about a blue bucket. And this happens to be a blue Halloween bucket. We'll see in just a minute. And you can see the image there. I can simply close my tag with a closing angle bracket, and I have an image. And this is all that's required to put an image into a web page. So you got to have an image, you have to have the image tag, and you have to have a source attribute that's going to point to where that is. And I'm just using a relative path to my image. Let me save this real quick and go in and load this up in our browser. Here's our image. Now, right now we don't have text wrapped around it. We'll show you how to do that in a few minutes. In our next video, we don't have anything else as far as where we can position it, but we do have an image. And you can see this is kind of like a Halloween candy holder, and it's a blue bucket. Now let's talk about those suggested attributes. And the big one that we want to look at is the alt attribute. And alt is short for alternative text. And that is what text would display if that image can't be found. So I can say blue pumpkin Halloween candy container. Or you might say bucket, or you might say, bag, or whatever you find would work for you. If I reload this, you're going to notice that because the image is there, nothing really happens. You don't see it, okay? But I'm going to change the spelling and intentionally misspell my source name. And I reload it. Notice that now, because I accidentally renamed my file incorrectly, that now the picture doesn't show, but that alt text does. And so this alt attribute provides information for my users in case the image can't be found for whatever reason. Whether that image gets deleted, whether they have their browser set to not display images, etc. More importantly is if you're working with someone who's maybe visually impaired and they're having a screen reader read the web page to them. The alt attribute lets it describe what that image is to that person. So now they can still get the benefit of that image. Now, we don't want to make really long alternate text, okay? Generally, a couple of words, maybe up to 15 or 20, that's all you want. It used to be in the old days, Google would sometimes look at this to try to figure out what images were about and what the web page was about, and people would just like keyword stuff in there. Because of that, Google doesn't look at that anymore. It completely ignores the alt text. But it still does have a huge value to your end users. And when you're creating a web page, you really need to be thinking about what is it like for my end users and how can I help them both in readability and usability and other things like that. Can we get them information they need? That alt text attribute is a huge benefit for them. So I recommend using that. Now, there is another attribute as well, and I'm going to go back and respell this correctly, and then we're going to add the title attribute. And the title attribute and the alt attribute are very similar in the way that they work. We have a way to kind of describe this image. So we're going to put the title as a special needs inclusion for Halloween. And what that's about is the blue bucket. If you're unfamiliar with that and seeing that Halloween, it's a special way to let people know that the person holding that bucket or with them is probably a special needs person, and they may have sensory issues. So they may not do things the way that a normal child would. And we want to try to include them in regular day-to-day activities. Things like Halloween, which is a special activity, and kids like to get dressed up and such. And so we're putting a title here for that. Now you might go, well, why did you add that title? Well, if you put your mouse cursor over an image, the title will appear. So you can put the title, what the image is, maybe some short definition, maybe a byline to who created it, other things like that. You can put here. It's simple text. It's not describing the image. It's giving a title to it. And so it works very similarly, but just a little bit different. And that's another recommended tag. Now, you don't have to have the title tag. You don't have to have the alt tag. The alt tag is recommended for any time that the image provides extra information. The title is recommended for any time you want to give credit or describe what that title is for that image. Otherwise, it isn't truly required. So if you have an image that's just a decoration type of thing, you leave those types of things out. If you have an image that's important to the context of your content, then you should include them. Now, the other question I do get a lot is what types of images are appropriate for a web page. And there's three main types that are consistently supported across all browsers, and they're easy for users to generate. There's some that are supported in some browsers, or some that if you have fancy graphic software, you can create and use. So we're going to talk about the easy ones. So the first one I want to talk to you about is what's known as a JPEG. And it often has a JPG extension, and it's used a lot with photographs. So this is a photograph of something in real life, and it is used as a JPEG. JPEG has what we call lossy compression, which means that the image gets slightly distorted every time it's saved. However, it saves to be a really small file compared to other file types. We have the GIF or GIF, depending upon how you want to pronounce it. The person who came up with that format said it should be pronounced with a J sound, GIF. Everyone else pronounces it with a G sound, as in GIF. And that image is used for things like solid images, words, graphs, what we might call line art or cartoons. You're limited to 256 colors out of the whole image. It is very small for certain types of files, though, especially if they have large blocks of repeating colors, like you would find in a chart or a cartoon or something like that. And that's why you see it used there. Now, replacing that, a little bit more modern, is your PNG or PNG files. Your PNG files work on the same basic principle where if there's a lot of the same color that repeats, the file can be pretty small in size. Additionally, you get a lot more colors available to you, so that's nice. And you can have more than one level of transparency. So with GIF, it's either transparent or it's opaque. With your PNG file, you can have multiple levels of transparency and fade something into the background. The downside is a lot of times if you do things like that, or if you try to take a photograph and convert to PNG, your file does tend to be a little bit larger. So it really depends upon what your image is that you're having, a photograph or a chart or cartoon, and that will let you know which type of image you should be using.